How do you know in retirement if you need an estate plan? That's why I'm sitting down with Billy Voiles of Fundamental Wealth Designs to find out the answer to that question. Billy, does it come down to a dollar amount for estate planning? Do I need to have $5 million, $10 million, $20 million before I need to do an estate plan?
Well, Spike, I'll ask the audience, do you plan on leaving anything, to the next generation? And if you do, I would at least go through the steps of uncovering what type of estate plan you need is I think more of the question here.
So does estate planning come down to looking at things like having at least a simple will and just covering your beneficiaries and your investment accounts, or do we need things like a trust to do it properly? When do you look at somebody's estates and go, we need to put together a plan for this?
Yeah, and estate planning to me is really about having the tough conversations when you're around rather than after you're gone and you can't have them anymore. Mm-hmm. So even when you think about estate planning, you have a trust, you have a will, but here's one thing people don't address sometimes, and it's simple healthcare directives. What do you want, at the end of your life, and how do you want to be taken care of? That's a part of the estate planning.
Isn't the assumption, though, that our spouse will then make that decision? And do we want the spouse having to make that medical decision at maybe one of the worst times?
In the means of stressful times and everything else. And that's why it's important to have it earlier than later. An advisor friend of mine, actually, this is a good story here. He's from Kansas City, and he had a lot of his clients say, we'll just get around to it. And estate planning is one of those things that you always plan to get around to, but never quite do. And so he made a bunch of little round tokens that said "to it" on them. And every time someone said, I'm just going to get around to it, he said, hold on. And he pulls it out from under the desk and slides it across the table and says, there's your round to it. It's time to get around to it. So I thought that was very evident of, an example of we really just need to do the estate plan. And we do that. As comprehensive financial advisors, we do estate planning along with the income planning, along with the tax planning, along with the risk management. It's all encompassing within our plan with Fundamental Wealth Designs.
Right. And so sometimes we do need the documentation, and then we hear things like trusts. How about that? Because you say you'll work with attorneys on that. You don't necessarily write the trust itself.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have a point or a dollar amount when you determine that somebody actually needs a trust, or does it depend on if they were a private business owner? When does that come into play?
That is more around, I would say, what are your intentions with the assets you want to leave behind, and what do you want them to do after you're gone? And if you have specific things that you want your money to do after you're gone, then you will need a trust in order to do so. A will still has to go through probate. A will just directs probate as to what to do. So you're still going to get into the cost of probate and going through probate with just a will. So we find that when we refer people to our attorneys, our partners in estate planning, usually 75-80% end up with a trust because it makes sense for them.
Right. At Fundamental Wealth Designs, I'm surprised here we're talking about estate planning. Would you say this is one of the main elements of what you do, or just part of a comprehensive plan?
It comes into every conversation because, again, at Fundamental Wealth Designs, one of the things we talk about is generational wealth planning. We don't want to give Uncle Sam any more money than we have to, especially when it comes to generational wealth planning. And estate planning is more than just trust, wills, and documents and lawyers like we're talking about here. Estate planning is how do we pass your assets to the next generation in the most efficient way possible, and sometimes it requires a trust.
That's why it's so important to sit down and talk with a financial advisor. If you're wondering how and when you need to do estate planning to pass generational wealth to your family, why don't you sit down with a financial advisor like Billy Voiles of Fundamental Wealth Designs. If you'd like to learn more about the team, you can also go to fundamentalwd.com and schedule an appointment to come on in.